May Jesus be praised and onward with Mary. Good and holy evening to all you dear children. It's lovely to see you again for this unusual Saturday night gathering. Every now and then on a Saturday night, I like to entertain you with a portion of pizza and chips, because generally, at least around here, that's how it's done, right? Saturday night generally is pizza night with that good, melting, delicious mozzarella that makes your mouth water. Well, so between a slice of pizza and another, I thought I'd entertain you. In fact, I was saying this morning to one of my colleagues, I received the news about what we are now facing. I said that tonight we need to have a catechesis, because otherwise one keeps postponing and postponing, and instead the iron must be struck while it is hot. So the title of this meeting is the following: a new appeal from scholars to Bergoglio, asking him to resign. It's news that circulated between last night and this morning, and unfortunately we completely changed the subject, because I would like to remind you that last Saturday we were here talking about the life of a great saint, Mariano. But what can you do? The situation is what it is. Of this and that. So, what we're about to discuss is symptomatic of the total situation, excuse me if I slip up, but I might slip up, of the complete chaos within the church. Now, the more sensitive among you, call it confusion, call it disorientation. That's what it is. They pretend not to notice. Is the signal good? Regie. The direction is gone, it seems. Direction? Let's see if we can figure out where we are. Ah, yes, I'm being told that perhaps the signal is good, but I see there are some delays, so maybe we can change the signal. Let's change the signal, and we'll see each other in a moment, dear friends. Here we are again, live, hoping that this time the signal we've set is stronger than the one from earlier.
Eccoci qui, di nuovo in diretta, sperando che questa volta il segnale che abbiamo posto sia più forte di quello di poc'anzi.
I was saying that the situation we are currently experiencing is one of great confusion within the church. In the church, which church? You can tell this from that. Which church? Because the question is crucial. Which church? So, dear children, we need to be clear about our ideas. If you don't have clear ideas, you will sink. There are no discounts for anyone. This was the introduction. That is, we are in the presence of a pool, a team of scholars directly addressing Bergoglio, asking him to resign. If you think about it, it's something even stronger than the petition put forward by Dr. 𝐥'𝐿𝐵, because Dr. 𝐥'𝐿𝐵 ultimately gathered thousands of signatures to discuss and review the current situation regarding the church, that is, the so-called Great Question. Here these authors, who are indeed far fewer in number, but probably more prestigious compared to us, ordinary people, in terms of international fame, openly ask Bergoglio to resign. Is it the first time? No, not first time will he forget. But not at all. Bergoglio will be completely... Not at all will Bergoglio be worried and not sleep tonight because this request has come in. Not at all. So what's the point? It's to demonstrate once again that the only one who is right is Don Minutella from the very first day. And thank goodness there are 7 priests who stand by him and have not abandoned him like everyone else has in one way or another. Some do it elegantly because it's too hard to accept what Don Minutella is saying, which is that from this reality, and I reiterate this evening because I believe it has become the decisive aspect, you shouldn't expect anything. There is the devil, you understand? I was very struck by a comment when I announced this catechesis for this evening. I would like to bring it up again. I didn't have time to sort it out. I want to bring it up again. A comment that made me think a lot. Spontaneous, quick, immediate, blunt, and of course it slipped my mind, in which this person, I can't remember who it is, said, probably one of ours, said it's yet another attempt to try to resolve the issue with the enemies themselves. It's clear that it can't be like this. It's clear that it can't be like this. I mean, you can't think you can solve things by making these continuous repeated appeals. Here, let's see. So I'll read you a couple of comments. I believe those who put him there have already decided to get rid of Bergoglio, imbroglio. It's just a matter of time. But we're there. It's becoming cumbersome now, too anarchic. They'll put in a two-faced person who will know, etc., etc. Here it is. Here's the other message. For me, as Don Alessandria and Brother Celestino said some time ago, this Vatican Church has nothing left that can be saved. Nothing left there. Hope all get it. Now more than ever, I urge everyone to mobilize on the 9th of June in Florence, and especially to join our crazy project. Danilo Mazzeo adds this, I presume that as the prophecies say, it will start again from 12, but not in the Vatican, perhaps south of Rome. We must believe in this, now more than ever. It seems like the Jews who left Egypt at some point in the desert long for the onions of Egypt. Let's write to the Pope. We'll wait to see if he resigns. Let's see if any cardinal does something. But which cardinal should do something? Which cardinal? Diplomacy while Satan is present. But can you imagine an exorcist who, while there's a possessed person foaming at the mouth, is writing a document to say, resign from this person, Satan? I don't know. But what we're paying isn't enough. Isn't it enough to be accredited? I say this with pain, because I see there are people from the little remainder who have found the easier way. What's the easiest way? Enjoying the show at the Colosseum, while Don Minutella and Don Bernasconi are being devoured by the beasts, and they are right there. They're not cheering, but enjoying the show. But are you with them? No, we're waiting in the meantime for Nero to die. After Nero, the others came. Right, that was quite an intense introduction, but now let's move on to the second part, the document. The document is a statement titled as such. Prominent Catholics urge bishops and cardinals, got it? Bishops and cardinals, I don't know who they could, goodness, turn to after 11 years to declare that Francis has lost the papal office if he refuses to resign. I mean, they seem to be trying apparently to corner Bergoglio. Either you resign, and do you think that's theologically normal? No, I'm on Bergoglio's side in this, but you have to understand me. What sense does it make to say either you resign or you lose the papal office? Have you ever seen anything like this? Excuse me, are we on planet Earth or are we on Mars? Either you resign or you lose the papal office if you refuse to step down. No, I'm sorry, poor Pope Francis. Don't do that. You shouldn't do that, I'm sorry. If it's the Pope, it's the Pope. He is the vicar of Christ, even though he humbly said he doesn't feel up to being the vicar of Christ. Then he welcomes the last, the poor, the marginalized. He cares for them. As 𝐶 says, it doesn't seem to be him. No, someone said, he is terrible. Antonio Sacchi said, it's terrible. And worse, the Pope for many things, but he's also the greatest Pope in his merciful acceptance of gay people divorced and remarried individuals, and so on. So the idea is already in itself. What does bislaka mean? Since you are heretical, we invite bishops and cardinals to say, but which ones? Berk, 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴𝐴, Zuppi. Who are these cardinals and bishops who should, after Bergoglio has filled the whole world with his, declare him heretical? Then they declare him heretical. Can you believe the miserable levels they stoop to? It's pathetic that we've ended up here for not wanting to listen from the start to what was the most uncomfortable path that Minutella proposed on behalf of heaven. I mean, it's not the Pope, you understand? So if it's not the Pope, there's nothing to discuss. Moreover, he's not just the Pope, he's the foreman of the false church. What is this? We invite him to resign so they recognize him as Pope. And he enjoys a nice glass of beer this evening. He plays with it, he relishes this thing, because it turns out to be the most important thing. I am the Pope. Could they ever think of deciding to dismiss me? It has never happened before. Which cardinal should dismiss me? The lengthy statement provides a summary of Pope Francis's interactions and relationships with some high-profile figures in the Church, such as Cardinals Godly Daniels, the famous author of the biography and the uncoerced revelation, always reminding us of the St. Gallen Mafia, Marx and Theodore Meckerich, reduced to the lay state, the pedophile cardinal who took a seminarian to bed every night. We are at truly satanic levels. Wilton Gregory, Victor Manuel Fernandez, the prefect of the faith. He says it all up front. But let's read. I was forgetting to mention that this document is taken from LifeSite News. So, a group of 17 scholars and activists has issued a lengthy statement asking Pope Francis to resign. Illicit. This is an absolutely spurious and superb request. No, layperson. And neither can any association of lay people presume to ask a pope to resign, if validly elected, or to be formally invited to do so by the College of Cardinals. Stating that Francis has caused an unprecedented crisis in the Catholic Church, with his words and actions, 17 signatories, yes, 17, we say it now, have attested that the Pope has done great harm to the Church and the entire world since he ascended to the papal throne in March 2013. In a statement released on the 2nd of May, today is the 4th, so the day before yesterday, the signatories, whose names we will now provide, stated that the members of the church hierarchy have a duty to act to prevent Francesco from causing further harm. What could this mean? Evidently they know something that we generally do not. What are they cooking up that they found out? You get me? If after 11 years Bergoglio is still there, doing whatever he likes because no one has stopped him, while a group of priests, just 8 of them, have accumulated 6 excommunications, and now it's practically just a matter of days, hopefully not, but it's now just a matter of days until the reduction to the lay state, it's clear that Bergoglio isn't concerned. But if they intervene, it means there's something brewing. That is, what it is we don't know, but probably Bergoglio is getting ready. Something very, very big, even more than all the other things that have already been done. They have added these 17 signatories. We therefore ask that Pope Francis resign from the papal office. Heard this in 2,000 years of church history? He must repent and do penance for his actions. But excuse me, so what about the whole theme of the Pope being assisted by the Holy Spirit? Validity of the canonical election on 13th March 2013. What happens to these? The magisterium, the Pope who confirms to the brothers of faith, you are Peter on this rock. If he's the Pope, Can't they explain this? What happens to the entire theological system? If he doesn't, then they are waiting for Pope Francis. Poor Pope Francis. 17 lay people are asking him to resign. If he doesn't, we ask that the cardinals and bishops of the Catholic Church request Pope Francis to step down from the office of Pope.
Se non si dimetterà, se non lo farà, chiediamo che i cardinali e i vescovi della Chiesa Cattolica chiedano a Papa Francesco di dimettersi dall'ufficio di Papa.
If this does not happen, the signatories have urged the cardinals and bishops to declare that Francis has somehow lost the papacy. Sorry, I've lost the papacy. Can't you help? Sorry, I'm looking for the papacy. I'm coming, eh? There's nothing here. Are you sure you haven't lost the papacy? Are you certain? They're looking thoroughly, but no one here has the papacy. Well, it seems that Francesco has somehow lost the papacy. Lost the papacy. Perhaps when he went on his last apostolic journey, at one point he got on the plane and said, "Dear brother cardinals, I've lost the papacy." The plane has returned. They say they started looking for him and still can't find him. It's wanted. No, dear children, look, I won't stand for this. Let's make our own way. God is making it clear to all of us who still have a shred of conscience that this is all clownish nonsense. Not just Bergoglio and the false church, but also those who, in one way or another, remain tied to Bergoglio, like these 17 signatories. So he has lost the papacy. I mean, he lost the papacy, Bergoglio. But how does one lose the papacy? So? I mean, but I don't use wallets. Then they sell those American things, the wallets with... I've never used wallets because the 2 times I did, I lost them or they got stolen. So I thought, but there's the chain. You know what a chain is? He has lost the papacy. If he refuses to resign or retract the heresies he has upheld, we ask that the cardinals declare he has lost the papal office. The signatories attribute the aforementioned unprecedented crisis to 2 factors. The first, Pope Francis has committed criminal acts that are seriously harmful to the Church and to individual believers. 11 years have passed. The second factor has shown a rejection of the Catholic faith and has worked to undermine the faith of other Catholics. The 17 signatories include a mix of academics, activists from various areas of church life, and a priest. I am the Reverend Linus Clovis. Then we have these lay people, Yves Daudal, editor of Reconquête and vice president of the Charlier Center, Daniel Fulep, Hungarian theologian, Mariano Guarini, editor of Church and Post Council. This is an Italian blog. Michael Kakuza, strategic management of East Africa. Thaddeus J. Kaczynski, professor of philosophy at Memoria College. Peter Kwaniewski, John Lamont, John Rist, professor of philosophy and classical and early Christian theology. Dr. Cesar Felix Sanchez Martinez, professor of philosophy at the National University of San Agustin in Peru. Wolfram Schrems, master, I don't know where. It's not written. Peter Stephan, professor of architectural theory and art history at the University of Applied Sciences in Potsdam. I believe it should be in Poland, Potsdam. Anna Silvas, specialist in Greek fathers, Australia. But she has withdrawn. She has withdrawn. The news just arrived. John Henry Weston, founder and editor of LifeSite News. Michael Wheatala, associate professor of philosophy at Cleveland State University. Elizabeth Yore, founder of Your Children. 𝐥'𝐿, senior editor, The Stream. These are the signatories. The lengthy statement provides a summary of his interactions and relationships with a number of high-profile figures from the Church, such as Cardinals Gottfried Dunnels, Rainer Marx, Theodore McCarrick, Wilton Gregory, and Victor Manuel Fernandez. The extensive list of individuals presented by the signatories claims to be part of the record of protection for sexual abusers by Francesco, which exemplifies his character and modus operandi. The signatories accuse Francesco of committing crimes other than heresy, asserting that the actions listed are crimes because they violate canon law, the law of temporal states, natural law, divine positive law, or some combination of laws from these different legal systems. They also list a number of other actions taken by Francis during his papacy, such as the secret agreement with China, the restriction of the traditional Mass, and the approval of blessings for same-sex couples, also stating that Francis has publicly and stubbornly contradicted several core teachings of the Catholic faith. However, the signatories did not place all the blame on Francesco, stating that he is a product of a broader crisis within the Church. Providing a historical overview of the development of modernism, the signatories wrote that during the complex event of the Second Vatican Council, the neo-modernists gained significant influence. After detailing their grievances against the Pope, the signatories requested that cardinals and bishops take action against Francesco should he not resign voluntarily. It's a mistake and a sin for the bishops, and faithful cardinals do nothing. It's a shame, say these signatories. This is perhaps the only reasonable thing of all. It's a shame, no doubt. In the hope that Pope Francis dies soon, these are the things I was saying 10 years ago, right? And be replaced by someone better. Ah, here's where the point is. Understood? They have already known what I've been saying for years. Because these are people of one group, because in the end they are one group, they have already understood that there is no way out. It's a dead end, as the French say, a blind alley. They have already understood or have had proof, mathematically, because look, spies always exist everywhere. Even in the big, powerful centers of authority, the leaders live with the traitor syndrome. God punishes them even in life. And let's not even talk about afterlife if they don't repent. But even in life they are damned, because they don't even trust themselves, let alone their collaborators there. Bergoglio keeps changing them, see? He's solitary, you never really know who's with him. Who's in Santa Marta? Who cooks? Are there nuns who look after him? Got it? Who are these secretaries that work with him? Got it? Because he lives with the betrayal syndrome. So, definitely, having discussed something quite significant, it's someone, in my opinion, but I've always been spot on with these things. It's that, blimey, I couldn't care less if you say I'm proud and arrogant. I'm on my mission, and it will be the Eternal Father who decides everything. I don't need your human judgment. I don't know what to do with it. I'm acting for the glory of God. And in this mission, there's no need for either caution or evasion. It's a straightforward mission, direct and to the point. They will certainly have realized that after Bergoglio, or perhaps I'm taking matters into my own hands, despite the understandable attempts made by Dr. 𝐥'𝐿 to suggest that Cardinal Paroline's position could be a diplomatic ploy, it is likely that they have understood that no, it is a dead end. In other words, it is a blind alley. Because I remind you that Cardinal Parolin, who is not a cardinal, said that after Francis, there is no going back. There will be no turning back. It's a turning point. It's a change that will move forward. And so, there they are. They've understood the whole universe of the unecumists, which, as I told them, they get what they deserve. It's causing Pope Francis incessant harm to souls and the Church every day. The faithful have the right to expect their believing pastors to protect them from his attacks. These pastors have a duty before God to protect them, and failing in this duty will bring upon them eternal punishment. I like this passage, I must say, from these 17 signatories, including an Australian priest. I think it's rather nice. As a first step, the bishops and cardinals of the Church should make every effort to obtain the resignation of Pope Francis, they wrote. While acknowledging that papal resignations are an extraordinary event that should not occur, they argued that Francesco's resignation would be the least harmful outcome available. If he does not resign, the signatories argue, in quotes, that it is the duty of the bishops and cardinals to declare that he has lost the papal office due to heresy in the event that there is not a sufficiently large body, and this is now the most interesting point, the cardinals and bishops to make the declaration. The signatories have requested that the prelates form, interesting that the word prelate comes up, form a group to publicly warn the faithful of his crimes and heresies. But this has already been done in the past several times. How many dubia have been raised? Do you remember those appeals to Pope Francis, with Professor DiMettta as a signatory in Italy, and other prominent figures worldwide, regarding the aporias of Pope Francis's magisterium? What did he do? A group of prelates to publicly warn the faithful, so no longer Bergoglio, the faithful, about his crimes and heresies. It's a pity they don't know we're here, because one of the boycotts that the Freemasons in Italy have managed is to prevent us, Don Minutella, the brothers of the association, from knowing that when I say Don Minutella, they accept it because they recognize that there is this advancement. But by now I can say, I would hope not. But I could say that now I have Don Enrico by my side, because he too is probably a saintly man being flayed alive. They don't know, however, in the Anglo-Saxon world that we are here because this is what we are doing, prelates. Some are bald like Brother Celestino on the head, but not prelates, yes, but bald ones who shout the truth, to warn the faithful not to believe his claims and not to obey his orders, unless it is clear on independent grounds that such claims and orders must be respected. Now let's go to the document. It is signed on the 2nd of May, 2024, deliberately for the feast of St. Athanasius of Alexandria. Since 2013, I will read, the words and reactions of Pope Francis have caused an unprecedented crisis in the Catholic Church and have inflicted serious harm on the Church worldwide. The members of the Church hierarchy have a duty to act to prevent Francesco from causing further harm. They must know something here. We therefore ask that Pope Francis resign from the papal office, repent, and do penance for his actions. If he does not, we ask that the cardinals and bishops of the Catholic Church request Pope Francis to resign from the papal office. If he refuses to resign or retract the heresy he has supported, we ask that they declare he has lost the papal office. We of the Sodalizio are truly experiencing, as the Madonna says, good success regarding the great prelate, without our reference to the great prelate. But to tell you, the Madonna says she will come, but her arrival will be extremely hindered. We at the association are experiencing immense pain. This is, at least I, but I think they do too, have been saying these things for years. They ignore us, they boycott us. We are doing what these signatories ask. Why do they ignore us? Why do they pretend we don't exist? Ultimately, we are still 8 clerics. This crisis is due to 2 factors. Pope Francis committed acts harmful to the Church and believers. Secondly, he has shown a rejection of the Catholic faith and has worked to revive the faith of other Catholics. First point, the crimes of Pope Francis. They call them crimes from the Latin crimen. First point 1.1, various crimes other than heresy. Point 1, he has committed criminal acts that have seriously harmed individual believers and the Church. Criminal acts, it's a strong document. The actions listed below are crimes because they violate canon law, the law of temporal states, natural law, divine positive law, or some combination of laws from these different legal systems. The relationships between these different legal systems are complex. For instance, the protection of sexual abusers by not reporting their crimes or placing them in situations where they can be expected to continue abusing. It's a crime in some states, but not in others. The crimes of Pope Francis listed below violate one or more of the following canons of the Latin Code. Canons 383 paragraph 1, 392 paragraph 1, and paragraph 2, 1311 paragraph 2, 1326 paragraph 1, 1378 paragraph 1, and paragraph 2, and 1399. Goodness. These canons are all based on natural law or divine positive law, so they are not canons from which the Pope can be dispensed. We've been saying this for years, and no one has believed us. When they call us the wretched 𝐼𝐻'𝐿, accomplices, at the risk of eternal salvation, the Pope first judges the souls. What's the point? But this is about someone who has been committing crimes for years, as we say. It should be remembered that the Church has, by divine right, the power to legislate for its members and to impose upon them temporal and spiritual penalties. This legislation is no less real and carries no less weight than that of civil legislation. That is, canon law applies to the Pope, the cardinals, the bishops, the priests, the clerics, and then all the faithful lay people. Point 1.1a. Protection of sex offenders and protection of religious superiors, who in turn protect the sex offenders. The bishops and religious superiors who protect criminals committing sexual abuse most of the time are simply the same, as they say, against nature, that is to say, homosexuals, are themselves criminals. Therefore, the protection and promotion of such individuals by Pope Francis is itself a protection of criminals. It has a particularly harmful effect because it tells these kinds of criminals that protecting sexual abusers is not only safe with him, but will likely also lead to promotion. The promotion of these criminals by Pope Francis has been so extensive and prolonged over time. We reported them, we laid down the cassock, because left alone by some, they still tear their garments over the things that Don Minutella said years ago. And now they are falling upon him. Both before and after his election to the papal see, which can only be seen as a constant discussion and routine politics, he appointed a large number of these individuals to the College of Cardinals. Note that a large number is stated in the document, among the cardinals, giving them significant influence over the election of the next pope and placing them at the top of ecclesiastical power within the Roman Curia and the American Catholic Church. The way Pope Francis has protected these criminals exacerbates his offense. He has repeatedly and brazenly lied about his actions and slandered the victims of these crimes. In addition to the specific cases reported below, there will now be some examples provided. It should be noted that Pope Francis has abolished the moderately effective procedures for addressing cases of sexual abuse of minors that were established by Pope Benedict XVI, replacing them with personal regulations and ineffective organizations that have led to a halt in the effective management of sexual abuse within the Church. I've been saying this for years, sorry if I repeat myself, but what can I say? You have to understand me. Francesco has supported this sabotage of justice with frequent public statements about the supreme importance of ending sexual abuse. All of this hurts when we are on the verge of the possible reduction of the dear Don Enrico's local status. Pope Francis protected sexual abusers before becoming Pope when he was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires. He is the president of the Argentine Episcopal Conference. The worst example of this protection is reported here, as it exemplifies his character and way of operating. Father Julio Grassi. Father Julio Grassi founded and managed the Happy Children shelters for street children in Argentina. He sexually abused the boys in these institutions. In 2009, he was convicted by an Argentine court for abusing one of them. At a high cost, Archbishop Bergoglio commissioned a report of 2,600 pages to exonerate Father Julio Grassi, instead slandering the victims. The report aimed to convince the judges of the Argentine Supreme Court of Grassi's innocence and was condemned by the court as an attempt to interfere with justice. When the report was challenged, Archbishop Bergoglio lied, claiming he was not involved. Julio Grassi dodged jail till 2013. Raised the voice a bit, but thanks to Bergoglio's intervention, Grassi testified that he has Bergoglio's personal support. After becoming Pope in 2013, Pope Francis shielded and advanced many sexual abusers and bishops who hid abuse. Some notable examples follow. Cardinal Godfrey Daniels, Bishop. Cardinal Godfrey Daniels, Archbishop, defended the catechism book Roche, used in Belgium under his authority, which promoted pedophilia, and he refused to modify or remove it. He acted to protect the pedophile bishop Roger 𝐕𝐻𝐻𝐻 after it became known that 𝐕𝐻𝐻𝐻 sexually abused his own nephew, starting when the nephew was 5 years old. When the nephew is an adult, who knows if they will close us now? Almost sure they'll shut us down. Now the Freemasons are there saying, "Oh my, this is known to 2,000 people on Saturday night." Who knows what will come out because they are finally arriving. Things are coming that we openly, because we, who are simple priests, have tackled the issue of how it works, from a legal perspective, I from a dogmatic perspective, but this was news that should have been given immediately. 11 years have passed. But what did you want? He abused the child at 5 years old, this one, the nephew. Cardinal Daniels was alongside Pope Francis on the balcony of St. Peter's. When the Pope first appeared publicly under protection, they wondered why. Domenico Minutella explained for years he backed Bergoglio with the San Gallo Mafia. Otherwise, he had no reason to be on St. Peter's loggia. Pope Francis named him a personal aide at both family synods. After his death in 2019, Pope Francis called him a zealous pastor who served the Church devotedly. Cardinal 𝐷𝐚𝐻. In 2014, Cardinal 𝐷𝐚𝐻, then Bishop of Bruges, appointed Father Tom Flames as parish priest after he had been convicted of sexual abuse. He removed Don Anton 𝐥'𝐴 from ministry only in 2015, although 𝐥'𝐴's crimes had been known to the diocese since 2014. Pope Francis chose Bishop 𝐷𝐚𝐻 as Archbishop of Mechlin-Brussels in November 2005, the most prestigious see. I ask for confirmation. I believe it is the most prestigious seat of Belgium, Brussels, because many times, like in France, there is Paris, but Lyon is more important. And he was made a cardinal in November 2016. Cardinal Reinhard Marx, I believe, is the one from Munich. Cardinal Marx admitted to having covered up many cases of sexual abuse when he was Bishop of Trier and offered his resignation to Pope Francis in 2011, citing this cover-up as the reason. Pope Francis rejected his resignation. Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, this is the most notorious case. In 2008, a woman reported to the English ecclesiastical authorities that O'Connor had sexually abused her when she was between 13 and 14 years old. The woman had already reported being abused by another English priest, Father Michael Hill, who was later convicted of this crime by a British court. I wonder, how can a priest jump on a non-consenting woman? There must be a devil involved. But how can a priest or a bishop jump on a woman and assault her? Hill had previously been removed from the ministry after allegations of sexual abuse of minors, but Murphy O'Connor, the then Bishop of Arran of Brighton, reinstated Hill in the ministry by appointing him chaplain of Gatwick Airport. In this role, Hill continued to abuse minors. In 2013, Pope Francis tasked Cardinal Gerard Ludwig Müller with closing the investigation into Murphy O'Connor for sexual abuse. Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga. Cardinal Rodriguez Maradiaga did not act following the numerous accusations of inappropriate sexual behavior with seminarians by José Juan Pineda Fachel, the oscillating bishop of Tegucigalpa, I believe it is in Honduras, who resigned after the accusations were made public. Yes, it should be Honduras, since he is Honduran Maradiaga. Maradiaga refused to investigate the complaints made by 48 seminarians out of 180 regarding inappropriate homosexual behavior at the seminary in Honduras, instead attacking the accusers. Pope Francis appointed Maradiaga as a member and coordinator of the Council of 9 Cardinals instead, that he established in 2013 to advise him in the governance of the Universal Church. We reached 2000. On the 15th of October, 2020, Pope Francis renewed Rodriguez Maradiaga's appointment as coordinator of the Council of Cardinals. Former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick had a decades-long career of grooming and pressure on seminarians to engage in homosexual relations with him. Pope Francis was personally informed of this behavior in 2013 and was told that Pope Benedict had imposed restrictions on him. 𝐥'Cherick had made frequent trips to Argentina to visit the seminarians when Pope Francis was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires. Dad, I have been there twice for a long time. I can't do what I shouldn't do, but it's coming out. When I told you, look, I've been to Argentina, I've told you how many times, and I know things that you humans, and now they're coming out. Pope Francis lifted McCarrick's restrictions on his activities imposed by Benedict XVI, and following the allegations of his crimes, who knows, maybe it's the sacrifice of Father Enrico, Brother Celestino, Father Gebhard, Father Ioannis, Father Robert, Father Pavel, got it? And then Don Ramon joined. Pope Francis freed McCarrick from sections on his activities and the lay people of the remnant, as some offer themselves to God, and then all the rosaries. Since we discussed rosaries for 10 years to free Austria, maybe we, not praying for years, the Eternal Father. He was removed from the ministry only in 2018, after his predation on the seminarians was widely reported by the media. Pope Francis, however, in the meantime, has appointed a circle of men connected to the former Cardinal McCarrick, hold important positions. Among them are Cardinals Robert McElroy. Tonight's episode is extremely dangerous, Joseph Tobin, Wilton Gregory, and Kevin Farrell, described below. Cardinal Blaise Cupich, Pope Francis has appointed. Cupich, Archbishop of Chicago in 2014, appointing him cardinal and member of the Congregation for Bishops in 2016. McCarrick, who had pushed for his appointment in Chicago. Cardinal Joseph Tobin. Pope Francis appointed Tobin, Archbishop of Indianapolis and Cardinal Archbishop of Newark in 2016. McCarrick, who had been his predecessor as Archbishop of Newark from 1986 to 2000, committing many crimes while holding that position. The Archdiocese of Newark made a payment in 2005 to a seminarian abused by McCarrick. Tobin refused to respond to an abuse allegation from McCarrick sent to him in 2018 by Mashiel Redding, a former seminarian. Cardinal Wilton Gregory. Cardinal Gregory worked with McCarrick on the drafting of the Dallas Charter in 2002 that outlined procedures for American Catholic bishops to respond to allegations of sexual abuse by clergy. The procedures of the charter were ineffective, as they glaringly omitted any provisions to address the accusations against the bishops. When he was Bishop of Belleville in Illinois, Gregory was charged with contempt of court for refusing to release documents of a priest accused of sexual crimes. When he was Archbishop of Atlanta in Georgia, he successfully opposed a law that would have extended the statute of limitations for damage claims for sexual abuse. Pope Francis appointed him Archbishop of Washington in 2019 and Cardinal. He was made a cardinal in 2020, Cardinal Robert McElroy. All of them will enter the conclave. McElroy was appointed Bishop of San Diego in 2015. He was a close collaborator of the former Cardinal McCarrick. In 2014, Maciel Mauro Giacomo reported that Jacob Bertrand, a priest of the Diocese of San Diego, had subjected him to satanic ritual abuse. No, I don't know, dear children. Just look. Other women have made similar complaints. Bertrand admitted his guilt to the diocesan authorities. In response to these accusations, Bertrand was simply transferred to another parish. Only when Mastro Giacomo went to the police did McElroy remove him from the ministry. The Diocese of San Diego falsely claimed to have no file on Bertrand's activities, and added that, even if they had any, they wouldn't have provided them. In 2018, Bertrand was convicted by an American court for sexual misconduct. You understand why I was a bit of a show-off at first, because then, as you can see, the topic would become extremely heavy. This is extremely heavy. I assure you, it's extremely heavy. With this stuff, you can even get to something bigger. I don't know. Earlier, he had confessed. Meanwhile, Father Livio sees in Putin the enemy who is destroying Rome. I don't know. Go tell him. Drink. Previously, he had confessed to the apostolic administrator of the Diocese of San Diego that he had raped my Maria. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. In 2016, clerical sexual abuse expert Richard Sipe informed McElroy that McCharrick was a serial abuser, but he remained silent and took no action. Pope Francis appointed McElroy as cardinal in 2022. Cardinal Donald Wuerl allowed Father George Zerwas to continue his ministry after learning he had committed numerous sexual abuse offenses. Wuerl resigned as Archbishop of Washington after his actions in this and other sexual abuse cases were criticized by a report from the Grand Jury of Pennsylvania. When Wuerl resigned, Pope Francis praised him for his nobility, kept him as the head of the Archdiocese of Washington as apostolic administrator, and retained him as a member of the Congregation for Bishops. Monsignor Juan Barros Madrid, Barros covered the serious sexual crimes of Father Fernandez Caradima. For the first time, I feel a bit ashamed to be a Catholic of this church. Thankfully, this is not the Catholic Church, but still, one feels a bit of shame. Condemned for sexual abuse by a church tribunal in 2011. Pope Francis appointed Barros Bishop of Osorno in 2015, even though Barros himself opposed the appointment, despite the opposition from Chilean bishops. And I talked about this, I remember I mentioned it to you, despite the strong protests from the faithful, because it struck me that even the faithful had said we don't want him to Bergoglio in Chile if he gives us a pedophile bishop. Pope Francis denounced Barros' critics as slanderers. Bishop Barros, however, was forced to resign in 2018 following the worsening crisis of sexual abuse cases in Chile. Cardinal Francesco Javier Errázuriz. Cardinal Errázuriz also protected Father Fernandez Caradima and tried to silence his victims. In 2013 and 2014, along with Ricard Ezzati Andrello, his successor as Archbishop of Santiago in Chile, he tried to prevent Juan Carlo Cruz, one of Caradima's victims, from being appointed a member of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. Pope Francis appointed Errázuriz to his cardinal council after Caradima's crimes came to light. He is still an electing cardinal. Cardinal Riccardo Ezzati Andrello Ezzati protected both Caradima and Father Oscar Munoz, who was convicted of repeated sexual abuse and rape of children. He tried to prevent the appointment of Juan Carlo Cruz, one of Caradima's victims, to the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. He submitted his resignation as Archbishop of Santiago in 2016 and again in 2018, but Pope Francis refused to accept it. Francis accepted Ezzati's resignation only in 2019, the day after the Supreme Court of Chile accepted Ezzati's resignation. he rejected 𝐥'Zadi's request to dismiss the civil case against him for protecting Muñoz. He remains a cardinal. Monsignor Gustavo Oscar Zanchetta, he is also quite well known. I have talked about him in the past. Zanchetta was appointed by Pope Francis as Bishop of Oran in Argentina in 2013. During his time as bishop, Zanchetta engaged in inappropriate homosexual behavior, including sexual harassment of seminarians. In 2015, photographic evidence of this was presented to the Holy See. Zanchetta resigned from his diocese in 2017, after which Pope Francis appointed him. What a shame, what a disgrace. He appointed him as an advisor in the Vatican at the Apostolic See, the Vatican Bank. This position did not exist before Zanchetta's appointment. It was created by Bergoglio. Zanchetta was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison in Argentina for sexual violence against seminarians in 2022. There was no trial or canonical sentence for these crimes, which were only punished by secular courts. Cardinal Luis Ladaria Ferrer of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith received reports against Father Gianni Trotta in 2009, and 3 years later found him guilty of sexual abuse of minors. The Archbishop Ladaria, he is the one who granted me the reduction to the lay state. He wrote from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith to the Bishop of Foggia in 2012, instructing him not to disclose the reasons for Trotta's laicization. Trotta continued to present himself as a priest while coaching an under-11 boys soccer team in the province of Foggia, thus quietly and undisturbed continuing to abuse several minors. It is precisely these who are either sick or possessed. In 2015, Trotta was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Ladaria also wrote to Cardinal Philippe Barbarin on behalf of the congregation, instructing him to avoid any public scandal while disciplining Father Bertrand Prénat, who was accused of sexual abuse in France in 2016 and subsequently convicted. In 2018, French authorities attempted to charge Ladaria Ferrer for trying to conceal Prénat's crimes, but the Holy See refused to extradite him. Pope Francis appointed Ladaria head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith in 2017 and created him a cardinal in 2018. Father Mauro Inzoli. In 2012, Don Inzoli was laicized by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith for child abuse. But Pope Francis intervened, reducing the penalty to prayer, penance, and removal from public ministry. In 2018, Inzoli was sentenced to 5 years in prison for 8 counts of sexual abuse against minors aged 12 to 16. Only then did Pope Francis reduce him to the lay state. Cardinal Oscar Cantoni. Cantoni was the Bishop of Crema when, starting in 2010, multiple reports of sexual abuse were made against Don Mauro Inzoli, a priest of his diocese. In 2011, the Congregation for Doctrine of Faith began proceedings against Inzoli. Cantoni told the faithful of Cremona not to yield to the condemning judgments against Inzoli. In 2013, Cantoni asked Cardinal 𝐥'𝐸 Palmerio to intervene with Pope Francis to obtain clemency for his former priest, Don Inzoli. The intervention was successful. Cantoni is responsible for covering up the sexual abuse committed against underage boys at the San Pio Tex Minor Seminary in the Vatican. However, Pope Francis made him a cardinal in 2022. Cardinal Francesco 𝐥'𝐸 Palmerio. Pope Francis appointed 𝐥'𝐸 Palmerio to the Council of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which examines appeals from clergy found guilty of sexual abuse of minors. In 2012, 𝐥'𝐸 Palmerio voted against the laicization of Don Mauro Inzoli for sexual abuse. Pope Francis appointed 𝐥'𝐸 Palmerio to represent the Vatican at the 6th Congress of World and Traditional Leaders in 2018 and made him a deacon cardinal and priest cardinal in 2022. Archbishop Mario Enrico Delfini of Milan transferred D. Mauro Galli to a new parish after being informed that Galli had sexually abused a young person. Delfini admitted it in a deposition in court in 2014. The Holy See was aware of it. Cardinal Vittorio Maciel Fernandez Tuccio, the trusted one, pleading. As the Archbishop of La Plata, Fernandez publicly defended Father Eduardo Lorenzo after a report of sexual abuse of a minor, originally filed in 2008, emerged in the media. Fernandez falsely claimed that civil and canonical investigations into this allegation had established that no crime had occurred. He published on the website of the Archdiocese the letter from Lorenzo, which accused the accusers of slander, insults, and defamation, and he went to Lorenzo's parish to concelebrate a mass with him, during which Lorenzo renewed his commitment to the priesthood. Lorenzo took his own life the day after being accused of 5 counts of sexual abuse against minors. This is Fernandez. Pope Francis made Fernandez cardinal head of the doctrine of the faith in 23. Cardinal Jean-Pierre Ricard. In 2022, Ricard admitted to having shown a 14-year-old girl. He was allowed to keep his status as a cardinal and cardinal elector. There was no trial or canonical punishment. Cardinal Kevin Farrell. In 1978, Farrell was ordained a priest by the Legionaries of Christ, the priestly society founded by the criminal sexual predator Marcial Maciel. It is used to promote his crimes. Farrell was the universal chaplain of the cantons of Monterrey, Mexico, the city that was the center of Maciel's activities, and later he became the general administrator of the Legionaries, responsible for seminaries and schools in Italy, Spain, and Ireland. He was then incardinated in the Archdiocese of Washington and worked as the general vicar for then Cardinal McCarrick, with whom he shared a residence. Farrell claims to have been completely unaware of the crimes of Maciel and McCarrick. These claims are not credible. After becoming pope in 2016, Francis appointed Bishop Kevin Farrell as a cardinal and put him in charge of the administration of the apostolic heritage that manages the Vatican's finances. In 2019, Farrell was made Cardinal Camerlengo, and in October 2020, he was appointed head of the Commission for Confidential Matters, a Vatican commission that determines which economic activities should remain confidential. In 2023, Francis appointed Farrell president of the Court of Cassation, which is the Supreme Court of the State of the Vatican City. Father Nicola Corradi. Father Corradi belongs to the Company of Mary, an Italian religious community that runs schools for deaf children. In December 2013, students from Provallo Institute in Verona wrote to Pope Francis about sexual abuse. These poor children. From Father Corradi at that institution, deaf and deaf-mute, and Corradi is still working with deaf-mute children in Argentina. They also sent a video message to Pope Francis on May 9, 2014. In February 2016, they were informed by the Vatican that Pope Francis had referred the matter to the Italian Episcopal Conference and that no further action would be taken. Don Corradi could keep abusing kids at Provallo Institute, Sorrento Archdiocese, Argentina. In 2016, Father Corradi was arrested along with other officials, and the institute was shut down. In 2019, he was sentenced by an Argentine court to 42 years in prison for sexually abusing children at the Argentine Institute between 2004 and 2016. The details of the abuses are horrifying. Now there is the story of Father Marco Rupnik that you all know, and there's no need to go into detail because it's extensive and detailed. Instead, let's move on now. I'm told that Aldo Maria Galli has also shared the statement. Let's go to the other aspects. This is the first, the most detailed, that is, an accomplice to these abuses. Another point, involvement in an act of idolatrous worship, desecration of St. Peter's Church, and sacrilegious desecration of the Mass. On October 4, 2019, Pope Francis witnessed an act of idolatrous worship of the pagan goddess Pachamama and participated in this act of idolatrous worship by blessing a wooden image of Pachamama. On October 7th, the idol of Pachamama was placed in front of the main altar of St. Peter's and then carried in procession to the Synod Hall. Pope Francis recited prayers in a ceremony involving this image and then joined the procession. When the wooden images of this pagan deity were removed from the Church of Santa Maria in Traspontina, thrown into the Tiber by Catholics outraged by this desecration of the Church, Pope Francis on October 25th apologized for their removal, and another wooden image of Pachamama was returned to the Church. On October 27th, during the closing Mass of the Synod, he accepted a bowl used in the idolatrous worship of Pachamama, and it was placed on the altar. Third point, removal of Catholic bishops without moral or legal grounds. Bishops receive the power of jurisdiction at the moment of their consecration, and this power is received directly from Christ. Lumen Gentium 21-27. It is not a delegation of papal power, and the bishops are not vicars of the Pope. The jurisdiction of a bishop over his diocese cannot therefore be removed simply at the will of the Pope. There must be a reason in natural or divine law that justifies the removal of the jurisdiction received from God. Removing a bishop from his see without a canonical process, a legal proceeding, is a crime against divine law. Pope Francis has removed from their sees Joseph Strickland, Bishop of Tyler in Texas, and Monsignor Daniel Fernandez Torres, Bishop of Arecibo in Puerto Rico. This was done without just cause, without legal proceedings, and without any explanation. Another point, suppression of the traditional Latin liturgy. In his motu proprio, Summorum Pontificum, Benedict XVI stated that the 1962 Missal, containing the traditional Latin Eucharistic liturgy, was never abrogated and must be duly honored for its venerable and ancient use. In the accompanying letter to the motu proprio, Benedict XVI stated that what was sacred for previous generations remains sacred and great for us as well, and cannot be suddenly prohibited entirely or even deemed harmful. These statements express the teaching of sacred tradition. Pope Francis' motu proprio Traditionis Custodes and his subsequent interventions in liturgical matters aim to definitively destroy this sacred liturgy and the communities of faithful connected to it. This is an apparent complete betrayal of the Pope's role in preserving and protecting the traditions and spiritual heritage of the Roman Catholic Church, and it seems to be an attempt to break the Church's most sacred traditions. Another point that establishes that adulterers are absolved and receive the Eucharist in circumstances where they consciously and willingly persist in the practice of adultery. In the Apostolic Exhortation Amoris Laetitia, Pope Francis established that in certain circumstances, adulterers must be granted absolution even if they intend to persist in adultery, and that they should receive the Eucharist while openly living in an adulterous cohabitation that they do not intend to abandon. Pope Francis has publicly stated on various occasions that absolution must always be granted. The obedience to this directive by confessors is sacrilegious, as the sacrament is invalid if absolution is given when the penitent expresses no intention of repentance and does not decide to renounce sin. New point. Establish non-liturgical priestly blessings for adulterous and homosexual relationships. In the Declaration of Trust Supplicans, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, with the irrevocable signature of Pope Francis, has ordered that Catholic priests bless couples when the foundation of the relationship between the individual members of the couple is adultery, fornication, or homosexual relationships. This means that the Supreme Pontiff of the Roman Catholic Church seems to have committed the ultimate moral betrayal by challenging both natural moral law and divine law in his legislation and teaching. New point. Collaboration with the Chinese Communist government. They are very delicate points, very delicate flowers. In 2019, Pope Francis sent Bishop Marcelo Sanchez Sorondo, then Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, to represent the Vatican at a conference on organ donation and transplantation held in Kunming, China. The Chinese government is known for executing political prisoners. Bishop Sorondo's presence here was scandalous and grotesque. At the conference, Monsignor Sorondo said that Francis has love and trust in China, and China trusts Pope Francis. In this dynamic, the next step is to reach an agreement to establish diplomatic relations. This statement by Bishop Sorondo, made in his capacity as an official representative of the Holy See, has never been corrected or renounced by the Vatican and remains a Vatican policy. In 2018, Pope Francis reached an agreement with China that allows the Chinese government to choose Catholic bishops in that country and instructed some faithful Catholic bishops to relinquish their dioceses to bishops appointed by the state. Agreement renewed in 2020 and 22. China is a totalitarian atheist state ruled by the Communist Party. Most murderous in history, the Chinese government treats its people with monstrous cruelty, demanding all beliefs and religious practices align with its policies. The Catholic bishops appointed following Pope Francis's agreement with China will be supporters and instruments of the communist government's policies. Since the conclusion of the agreement between the Vatican and China in 2018, the persecution of Catholics and other Christians has significantly increased. Pope Francis has never mentioned the persecution of Chinese Christians since the agreement was made, and has renewed the agreement twice, despite the rise in persecution that followed and continues to this day. The crimes committed by Pope Francis, such as his protection of sexual abusers. In some cases, they are crimes according to the standards of the laws of sovereign states, as well as moral and canonical crimes. By committing them, Pope Francis has made himself vulnerable to the blackmail of powerful temporal forces that have the resources to investigate his crimes and obtain evidence. In this light, Francesco's collaboration with the Chinese government and his appeal for Ukraine to surrender to Russia may be linked to such blackmail. Even if this hasn't happened in these cases, the civil crimes that Francesco has committed mean that such pressures can be effectively exerted on him. This fact alone makes him unsuitable to become Pope. Second point, nearing the end, heresies of Pope Francis. Since we have discussed this extensively, let's read the introduction and then just name what these heresies are. Pope Francis has publicly contradicted persistently, that's the point, persistently, a series of central tenets of the Catholic faith. Only the clearest heresy cases will be reported. I'll briefly note where he stated them. These statements have been extensively analyzed by faithful Catholic scholars, whose works can be consulted for a more detailed discussion. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. Some of the actions of Pope Francis listed below also violate Canon 1368, and let a just penalty be imposed on anyone who, in a demonstration or public assembly, or in a published writing, or by any other means of social communication, utters blasphemy or seriously offends public morality or incites hatred or contempt against religion and the Church. And the Canon 1369, let a just penalty be imposed on anyone who desecrates a sacred object, whether movable or immovable. Acts that violate divine commandments in serious matters can be morally good and pleasing to God. And then again, God not only allows, but positively desires pluralism and the diversity of religions, both Christian and non-Christian. Adulterous relationships can be morally good. Adultery, fornication, and homosexual relationships can be morally good. The death penalty is always and everywhere morally wrong. Some Catholic dogmas can be rejected as false. The passages of Scripture can be rejected as false. Context and effects of the crimes of Pope Francis. To understand the crimes of Pope Francis and to discern how to respond to them, it is necessary to recognize that Pope Francis is the product of a broader crisis within the Church. And here lies the parallel with the usual cliché that Pope Francis is merely the result of what have somehow not been the papal presidents, because thank God this is not said here, but the neo-modernist context of the Church. And this, in some way, has a kernel of truth. It's pointless to hide it. Let's go to the bitter conclusion of this very long document. The document, the final part. The final point is Action 4, actions to take in response to the crimes of Pope Francis. Pope Francis is clearly unfit for the papal role. His main fault is disbelief, as he no longer upholds the Catholic faith which he must defend, creating a moral duty to resign. Disbelief isn't the only reason Pope Francis should resign. The papal role demands high natural and supernatural virtues. Pope Francis lacks these virtues. They should ask why. Isn't he the Pope? Can't reach. Without believing in the Catholic faith, he lacks the knowledge and the necessary graces to repent for his past sins, to correct the wrongs he has committed, and to fulfill the duties of his office. Lacking faith, he also lacks every supernatural virtue. He has shown himself to be lacking in natural virtues, prudence, and justice. Even if he were to repent of his past sins, which we sincerely hope he does, he would still be unfit for the papacy due to his character flaws. The only good course of action available to him is to retract his heresies, express remorse for the harm he has caused, resign from the papacy, and dedicate the rest of his life to prayer and penance. Unlikely he'll do that. The Church must therefore decide how to act in front of him. A duty that the Church must fulfill is to speak about the crimes and heresies of Pope Francis, to denounce them, to warn the faithful, and to implore Pope Francis to renounce them. All Church members must teach and uphold the faith. It falls on the theologians and Catholic pastors who care for souls, but it mainly falls on the bishop of the Church. Each of the bishops of the Cantoni Church, as a member of the legitimate episcopal college and rightful successor of the apostles, is obliged by the institution, here is Lumen Gentium 23, and by the command of Christ to be diligent for the whole Church. And this diligence, even if not exercised through an act of jurisdiction, greatly contributes to the benefit of the universal Church. Indeed, it is the duty of all bishops to promote and safeguard the unity of faith and the common discipline of the entire Church. Those who have the responsibility to speak in this way incur the guilt of the crimes of Francis if they remain silent. Silence is taken to mean consent if one should have spoken and could have done so. Those who remain silent are understood to consent, even though they should have spoken and could have done so. The obligations of the bishops are not limited to the public denunciation of the crimes of Pope Francis. Since these crimes have already been the subject of public pleas, protests, and denunciations by the faithful, and Pope Francis has done nothing but persist in them, there are good reasons to doubt that he will be affected or brought to ruin by further protests. His stubbornness in heresy has gone so far that it makes sense to consider him a public heretic now. This creates a serious situation for the Church. The Cantoni Church has always maintained that popes can be heretics, and that a pope who commits the public crime of heresy consequently loses the papal office. This belief is based on the teachings of the Scriptures that state that the heretic separates himself from the Church by committing the sin of heresy. It is clear that a pope who chooses to leave the Church by embracing heresy cannot remain pope. Theologians and canonists disagree on the details of how an heretical pope loses his position. It is a mistake and a sin for the bishops and faithful cardinals to do nothing, hoping that Pope Francis will die soon and be replaced by someone better. Pope Francis is causing relentless harm to souls in the Church every day. The faithful have the right to expect their believing pastors to protect them from his attacks. These pastors have a duty before God to protect them, and failing in this duty will bring upon them eternal punishment. As a first step, the bishops and cardinals of the Church should make every effort to have Pope Francis resign. He has the duty to resign under the current circumstances, and his resignation would be the best solution to the catastrophe of his papacy. This is true despite the fact that papal resignations are an extraordinary event that should not happen, as the papacy is a sacred office that should only be vacated upon the death of the reigning pope. Benedict XVI's case shows papal resignation woes, but it wasn't valid. That's what needs to be understood. But even the reign of a corrupt pope who has rejected the faith and is unable to responsibly exercise the papal office is an extraordinary event that should not happen. Since it has happened, the resignation of the pope in question is the lesser evil there is. If Pope Francis refuses to resign, it is the duty of the bishops and cardinals to declare that he has lost his office due to heresy. If such a declaration cannot happen because the bishops and cardinals willing to speak about Francis's heresy are too few, the faithful bishops and cardinals should form a united group to publicly warn the faithful of his crimes and heresies, declare that his papal mandate is in doubt due to his heresy, and admonish the faithful not to believe his claims and not to obey his orders, unless it is clear on independent grounds that such claims and orders must be respected. Even the resignation or declaration of the removal of Pope Francis will not solve the Church's problems. When he is gone, the clerical corruption that produced him and that has favored him will remain. But addressing the crimes and heresies of Francesco is the first essential step to tackle this corruption. This is the long historical document that I presented to you this evening. You can find it online. Conclusion, very quick. They say it's about time someone told everyone that Bergoglio is not the Pope and should not be followed. When I was a scout, I had done with someone the It's called totemization, that is, moving up to the next rank. We had to follow a path at night. I had studied my path and that of the person who was with me, the boy who was a bit scared of the thick darkness of the forest. He had to follow a path similar to mine, but he had to venture into the woods. I didn't want him to go into the woods. I thought I could go with his map. And studying it carefully, I said, you need to have a bit of courage and be exactly at this point here that I'm now indicating to you. I will go around also for you, so I can describe what you will then need to tell, but in the end, we will both be at the same point, as if we had crossed this dark forest together. That's how it went. What do I mean? We priests of the Brotherhood are facing the dark woods. These are the ones waiting at the corner. The important thing is that we come together, and that one way or another, this shameful disgrace is put in the corner, and finally humanity and the Church can have a bit of breathing room. Let it be given to Jesus Christ and onward with Mary.